Hello, my dear Franken friends, and welcome to Spookyou, your one-stop shop for all things ghastly and ghoulish. I'm your host, Barnabas Vixen. How horrible of you to join us. Curl up, invite your friends, and by all means, make sure those lights are out. That way it's harder to tell what may or may not be lurking around you. There's nothing like a good mystery, am I right? Tonight will feature a singular tale of devilish design, curated by those wicked weavers of woe. And without further ado, allow me to pass the reins on over to our vivacious voiceover virtuoso, Trey Falco, for tonight's sinister story. Please keep all limbs and side covers at all times. We wouldn't want anything to go missing now, would we?
The Greyhound arrived at my destination 3 days later. I got off. I was in a city in a state I had never been to before, on the other end of the country. By then, the police back home had identified me and begun a statewide manhunt. The first thing I did was buy a new car. I located a used car for sale from a private seller in a classifieds magazine and bought it the same day, paying cash and using an assumed name. I stayed in the city for a week, living in a cheap motel off the interstate and eating at fast food joints. I watched the TV carefully. Back in the city I'd used to live in, the police commissioner spoke at a news conference. The triple shot killer was believed to have fled the state, and federal authorities were about to launch a nationwide manhunt. Several of my former coworkers were interviewed, expressing shock at the secret other life I had led. He looked like such a normal young man to me, Casey, the older cashier I'd been on good terms with, said with a look of disbelief. Just a normal, easygoing guy. I guess you could never tell about some people. Next, they interviewed my former bagger friend Carrie. He was acting pretty sketched the day before, like he had something to hide. Blew up at me for no reason. I thought maybe he'd got some bad news or something. I guess he did. In local news, a young woman who had been in the hospital recovering from the removal of a benign breast lump had died unexpectedly from what her doctor diagnosed as sudden cardiac arrest that was believed to have been brought on as a side effect of the pain medication she had been put on. He was interviewed, expressing sadness and regret at her untimely death. He was a shadow face. I turned the TV off, shuddering. I woke on the 8th day feeling anxious. I felt a sense of impending doom, an intuition that I had stayed here long enough and if I remained I would be pushing my luck. I left that same day, with no particular destination in mind. I drove out of the city, careful to obey the speed limit and traffic laws. I made sure both of my taillights were working in advance. I was driving an unregistered, untitled vehicle, and my driver's license had the name of a wanted murder suspect on it. If I got pulled over even once, I knew I was finished. There's not much more to tell. If you've been following my trial, you should already know the rest. I spent the next 7 years driving across the country in a random pattern, never staying at a new place longer than a couple of weeks. I lived as a drifter, a nomad. Occasionally I'd find work doing odd jobs and through various day labor organizations, temporary jobs that paid cash, to make money for gas or food. I'd travel to a new city or town, stay a little while, work, and then, when I sensed that I was in danger of being recognized, when I had a premonition that my enemies were closing in, I'd move on to someplace new. I had a couple of close calls. In Des Moines, I left a construction job I'd been on for about a week and drove out of the city less than an hour before the cops arrived, having received a tip from someone that I was in the area. I changed my appearance and my name constantly to avoid detection. It wasn't just the authorities I was afraid of finding me. They knew who I was by then, and I could sense they were hunting me as well. I continued to hunt them whenever I felt I could get away with it. They were everywhere. Everywhere I traveled, I saw them. They weren't as common out in the country and rural places as they were in the cities, but there were always at least a few there, too. I killed them whenever I could. Sometimes I'd capture them alive, bind them, and drive them out to some secluded location. An abandoned house, a barn, the basement of a deserted building. And I'd torture them first, trying to get information out of them. Trying to get answers to the question I was always asking myself. What were they? Where had they come from? What were they planning to do? They never answered me. No matter what I did to them, no matter which body part I cut off or burned. They just stared back at me defiantly with their burning, red, soulless eyes, seemingly impervious to pain. Sometimes they'd even laugh at me. I never disposed of the bodies. I always left them to be found, as a message to the others of their kind. It was because of the brutality of these murders that I developed such a horrific reputation through the press.
Flynn's Fantastic Arcade and Fun Park, the latest and greatest arcade games, go-karts, terror ball, and the only place this side of the astral plane where you can shoot actual lasers at your best frenemy, and nobody bats an eye. But let me guess, lasers are so last summer, am I right? No worries, you can enjoy lifelike virtual reality with their all-new Master Control integration. It's like opening your eyes for the very first time. Visit your favorite places you never knew existed, the dark depths of the nether dimension, and much, much more. It's the trip of a lifetime. And admission is dirt cheap. Right now, Flynn is sporting a back-to-school special where admission is only the price of one soul. That's right, Tiny Tim. Due to your unwilling sacrifice, the entire family can enjoy 2 hours at Flynn's Fantastic Arcade and Fun Park. Limit 1 per soul, absolutely no refunds. So what are you waiting for? Flynn's Fantastic Arcade and Fun Park, the most tragic place on Earth.
My victims were all ages, sexes, and races. The hardest was probably a 12-year-old girl in a private school uniform who I lured into my car in a suburban neighborhood just outside Cincinnati, using a pretense I don't even remember now. I took her to an abandoned industrial complex on the outskirts of the city, splashed her with gasoline, and threatened to light a match if she didn't talk. She didn't give up her ruse, didn't break her act the whole time, crying and acting innocent, telling me she didn't know what I was talking about, telling me she wanted to go home to her parents, begging me to let her go. I felt a brief stirring of uncertainty in my heart, maybe guilt or sympathy, but I squelched this feeling and remained stoic. I set her on fire and watched as she burned, screaming. I know, it sounds horrific. I know I sound like a sadistic, heartless monster, a brutal, twisted psychopath, but you have to remember, these things weren't human, even though they might have fooled everybody else, including their family and friends. I knew what they really were. Monsters. Demons that preyed upon societies weak and forgotten and ignored, sucking out their life forces or souls or both. I coped with it by telling myself that even if that thing had really been a normal young girl at some point, it wasn't anymore. And if there had still been a trace of the real her, a shred of her human consciousness or soul or whatever you want to call it trapped inside her shell by the thing that had taken her over, I had released it, set it free. And I'd love to tell you that I was doing it all for purely altruistic reasons, that I was on a noble quest to save the world and rid it of evil, but that would be bullshit. I think I was mostly doing it out of revenge. These fucking things had destroyed my life and ruined any chance I had at a living, normal existence. They had turned me into a cold-blooded killer, had forced me to abandon my life, my home, and the people I knew, to become a wanted man on the run, constantly looking over my shoulder in never-ending fear of capture or death. I wanted to make them pay. In Phoenix, I encountered something that scared me quite badly. Something that, until then, had been unique to me. An entire family of shadow faces. A couple who looked to be in their late 30s and 2 young children. Either Jeremy had been wrong about how you never saw more than one in a family, or they were multiplying faster than he had suspected. I followed them in my car from the shopping center where I'd spotted them to their pleasant middle-class suburban home. I returned late that night and broke into their house. I learned how to bypass home security systems, and I killed them in their beds, one by one, while they were asleep. By that time, I was on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. In addition to watching the news religiously, I also read the newspapers. In Baton Rouge, I read an article that made my heart sink like a lead weight. I felt numb. Back in the city where I had used to live before this nightmare had begun, police were investigating a bizarre, grisly murder that had happened a few days prior. A young man named Kyle Beaumont had been brutally tortured and murdered in his own apartment. His eyes had been removed and nailed to a wall. Below, a message scrawled in his own blood. A cryptic message that baffled the police. A message I knew had been left specifically for me. Your friend Jeremy sends his regards. I stared at the photograph that accompanied the article, stared at the face I clearly recognized from that long-ago night in the park. An awkward-looking young man with a thin face and short black hair, haunted eyes magnified by the lenses of his glasses. I let the newspaper fall from my hands and flutter down to the floor. I was trembling.
Welcome back, my darling deviants. Well, tell me, did you enjoy that twisted tale? Of course you did. I knew you had that air about you, that hunger for the horrific and the macabre. So, did we spook you? If not, then file a complaint with our complaint department detailing all accounts of non-spookiness you found in this video, and we'll get back to you in 2 to 3 millennia. Give or take a business eon or 2. However, if you've enjoyed what you've just heard this evening, then make sure you leave a like on this video and annihilate that subscribe button. Such a small act of obedience is exactly what we need to put the food on the table around here. There's only so many days we can have refried kidney and toe jam hash before I'm absolutely sick of it. Spoiler alert, that ship sailed long ago. Now, I must bid you adieu. I've many things to take care of, and this outro is eating into my day off. Run along now. Have no fear, we'll be here every Tuesday and Thursday to bring you another terrible tale. Go forth, my ghastly gang, and stay spooky.